This is taking. Hey, there we go. Hey, folks, thanks for tuning in to the BAMF podcast. I am your host, Mike Lafferty, and here is our contractually obligated intro music. Gentle listener, that assures you you're listening to a high quality, high production values podcast. And with us today, we have frequent guest and really great guy. We're happy he's back, Mr. Craig Campbell of Nerdburger Games. How are you doing, sir?
Good. How are you two?
Are awesome. Glad to have you. Hey, so we were going to talk about some pop culture stuff and talk about your new project. Mm-hmm. And I have been looking at my YouTube stats, and I have found out that people really like my show for the first 10 minutes. Viewership peaks about 8 or 9. So I think we should open up talking about your new Kickstarter and then segue into talking about pop culture stuff. What do you think?
Sure. However you want to do it.
Oh, I'm just trying to help you out, bro. Let's get this out. Now, Nerdburger has done a ton of great games over the years, and this one is an interesting departure for you guys because this is a solo tabletop RPG set in kind of a cool magical aquatic setting. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the Secrets of the Vibrant Sea RPG?
Well, it actually started last fall with Secrets of the Vibrant Isle, which was a solo RPG where you put together a character. It's kind of a very simple rules light game, but there is, you do actually generate a character with some stats, and there's a few things to track, and equipment and all magic and all these sorts of things. And you went about exploring this mystical magical island that you shipwrecked on, and the ultimate goal of that game was to encounter the inhabitants of the island and sort of integrate yourself into their community and become part of the island. And the goal ultimately, was basically to prove to the island that you were worthy to stay. Like the island is mystical and it wants to get rid of people that shouldn't be there. And then this game, Secrets of the Vibrant Sea, is it basically works two ways. You can play it as an extension of the first game, so you can create your character there and take them right into this game and continue on. But this game also has all the information that you need in order to be able to just play it standalone. So it supposes that you are on the island, and now you're going to go and explore the ocean around the island, the mystical and magical ocean that surrounds it. And it's sort of a cross between like a rules light RPG with just a little bit of crunch and kind of a choose your own adventure type game, where everything's kind of built as a series of prompts for different explorations that you go and that you go around and encounter. And then also, much like the first game, in this one, you are discovering the inhabitants who live out in the ocean. The game is set up in such a way that the inhabitants are not defined specifically. You encounter them over the course of a series of encounters, and each time you encounter them, you learn a little bit more about them, and you sort of world build them as you go. So you first notice them from afar, so you get an idea of how big they are, what they're shaped like, and then you experience them up more closely and get to know a little bit more about their mannerisms and things, and then eventually skills and capabilities that they have, and eventually they invite you to their community. And then in this version, you are then embroiled in learning that there is there's some sort of darkness. There's a threat rising from the deep that may wipe out the island and the sea and all of these people that you've met. And so you have to stop that. And there's a bunch of different versions. There's 5 different finale scenarios. So the game is set up in such a way that you can replay it and have very different experiences where you see different encounters. You build the inhabitants to be different each time. You do different finales at the end, and then just the randomness of what you do, what magic you come across and what gear you find and all that sort of thing will change each time you play.
Okay, cool. Had a couple questions for you, but first off, this really reminds me of, hey, we have a commenter, Brooke Wegman, saying, "Hi, Craig." So,
hi, Brooke.
Thanks for watching. We appreciate it, Brooke.
Brooke was a member of Team Nerdburger a few years ago, came and ran games for me at Gen Con.
Oh, nice. It must be cool to have your own team. You guys have uniforms or jumpsuits?
No jumpsuits, no.
Oh, okay.
No uniforms.
I've been thinking about when we get Team Banff, we have a con squad. I'm thinking berets, but it'll depend on what style sheet we pick. Maybe kilts. So you described this as kind of a cozy game. Can you tell us what that means?
It's designed to be. Both of the games are designed to be like for when you don't have a group to sit down and play a game with, where you can kind of just hunker down with a little snack and a drink, and you could conceivably wrap yourself up in a blanket or sit down at a nice warm computer screen and play the game. And you can kind of take it at your own pace because there's a fair amount of gameplay involved, but you're also tracking your days on the island or in the ocean as you play. So you could play like a week of time and then set it aside and come back to it again. You could play it over consecutive lunch periods, lunch breaks. You could play it a few evenings. You could play half of it one weekend, half of it the next weekend, and just kind of settle in and have a little adventure that's kind of laid out for you. And that gives you an opportunity to kind of exercise your imagination and fill in the gaps. And then there's options described in the game too for like if you wanted to journal the game, you could expand it and make it a more robust experience where you write the diary of the character that's doing all of these things, rather than just treating it more like an adventure game.
That is really fascinating to me. I remember when I was a wee lad, all those years ago, my dad had a solo RPG. I want to say from Tunnels and Trolls, where it was like choose your own adventure, but you had a character sheet and there were rules, and you had to, as you went through, if you fight the kobolds, flip to page 7, and then you had to roll and see what happened. And it seems like it, shares some of the DNA with this, but like there's a lot more world building that you do yourself as you go through this, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Yeah. I mean, there was the Fighting Fantasy series from, I believe, Steve Jackson, years and years ago. That was basically like choose your own adventure, which is like reading a novel. Like you're reading page after page of stuff, and then every so often you would make decisions, and that would branch you into different things. And the Fighting Fantasy was kind of the same way, where it was narratively more was filled in for you, whereas with this game, it's putting more of the onus of the imagination on you, where you're being provided with a couple of short paragraphs that are kind of prompting everything, and then there's something that happens to your character, or you gain something or lose something, or there's a trait check that you make or whatever.
This is really cool.
I'm really liking the art on the that I see here. It's incredibly colorful, and for me, it's kind of it reminds me of a video game called Subnautica, which is a ocean exploration game. So that's a beautiful, gorgeous game. So this bringing that to mind, it's really neat. I love the visuals you got here.
The artist is Gemma. On Twitter, she's known as Ashen Wave, ASHEN Wave. And the game actually came out of her art. I came across her art several years ago and just started following her on Twitter. And she just, just does this art that's all these beautiful, deep, vibrant colors. And just purely out of her imagination. And at one point I reached out to her and said, hey, if I ever think of a game idea that kind of fits your art, would you be interested in licensing use of some of your art? And she said, sure. And then about a year later, I hit on the idea of Secrets of the Vibrant Isle, and that became the first game. And then as Shireen and I were co-designing that one, and we put it, play tested it, and we're having a lot of fun with it, and everybody was kind of liking it. We put it up on Kickstarter, and it started to do very well. I found myself looking at Gemma's art again and was like, she's really done a lot of aquatic themed art. So here we go out into the ocean. And so it made sense because she had done so much aquatic themed stuff. There's a lot of variety there. So it took the, it allowed her to just she just creates, and then I find the pieces that inspire me to do something with the game, and she doesn't have to end up underneath, she's not doing commissions. She's not under any sort of pressure to do anything. And it also allows us to different than a lot of game situations was the art was done. So I just had to arrange to license it and everything. I didn't have to wait a bunch of time for a bunch of art to get created.
That's I always live in Kickstarter when you've got so much finished. Yeah, less pressure. You can just kind of focus on the campaign and communicating it to people. So, well, this looks beautiful. I am going to check this out and back this myself. What kind of stretch goals? Because you guys have long ago smashed through your primary goal, and we're working on stretch goals. What comes next?
Well, it's pretty simple. We're going to do it the same way we did it with the first game, which was, in both cases, the game is kind of tightly designed. There's, it would be very difficult to add a bunch of additional content. You could expand the book, you could have longer paragraphs of information, but it's all designed because there's only so many encounters that you can get out of a percentile dice roll, the whole process of how many different encounters provide you with gear, how many provide you with magic, blah blah blah. So rather than trying to expand the game and build out that, all the stretch goals are putting money into the hands of the contributors. At $10,000, we will do a plus 25% pay bump above their previous, their contracted fee that they've already been paid. To all of the contributors, and then every 5,000 after that will be another 25%. So if this game were to do terribly well, do quite well, everybody could end up getting paid twice as much as they were originally contracted for.
I want to give you props for that, Craig, because like you guys, I've been doing RPGs for a long time, and you hear so many stories about I didn't get paid, don't work for this publisher, don't work for that publisher. And you're being really transparent about if we do this well, the money goes back to people who actually created the content. And I think that is laudable. And that's a good thing you're doing there, sir.
Absolutely.
With the first one, we hit 3 stretch goals and everybody got 75% more. So fingers crossed we can get there again.
Well, good for you. That is great. To anyone listening, you can follow the artist. That's at Ashenwave, just like it sounds, on Twitter. And Craig, the nice fellow we're talking to, at Nerdburger Show, also on Twitter.
Nerdburger Craig.
Not Nerdburger Show?
Nope.
I'm sorry.
That was a podcast that me and my friend Mike did. Mike's still doing it. I bowed out of the podcast a while back to focus on some other things, but yeah, it's still out there. The Nerdburger podcast is still out there, but Nerdburger Games, and for me on Twitter, it's at Nerdburger Craig.
Okay, my bad. At Nerdburger Craig. All right, cool. If you do a search for Secrets of the Vibrant Sea RPG Kickstarter, it comes right up. The link will also be in the show notes. And we wanted to talk about a show Craig has been watching, and I'm curious because I'm a big fan of both Ben Stiller and Adam Scott, who are involved in this show. This is Severance from Apple TV, and you know what, Craig, why don't I let you kind of set it up for the audience?
Oh boy. It's on Apple. The first season came out a little while back. It's 9 episodes, I think, if I remember ago. And without giving too much of away, because it is quite a mind bender of a show, and there's going to be twists and turns and kind of weirdness that happens. And I think I went into it knowing very little, and I think that enhanced the watching. But to kind of set up the basics of it, this is not spoiling anything. This is information that you learn within minutes of starting to watch the show. It's set kind of supposedly modern day, but with a technology in place that this company is using called the Severance, where they sever your work self from your everything else self. And it's location based. So when you arrive at work, the main characters, Adam Scott and everybody, when they arrive at work and they go into the basement of this office that they work at, everything about their life outside of the office is locked away in their brain. They can't access it. They don't remember anything about their life growing up. They don't know any of their friends or family members. All they know is what they need to know to do work and basic human stuff, they can speak, and they have personalities and everything. And then when they leave, all of that is locked away in their brain. They don't take any of their work knowledge out into the real world. So they go back to everything about their world, their life in the world outside of work is exactly the same. They remember everything. The only thing they don't remember is what they do for a job. And it is an indictment of corporate, fuckery. It's it raises really interesting questions about how corporations treat their employees. It raises interesting questions about free will and choice, and because like this is a little setup is and you learn it fairly quickly in the show too. If when you are there, you're an innie and an outie. They call them innies and outies. When you're outside of work, you're an outie. When you're inside of work, that's your innie. And when you're an innie, you can choose to stop working there, but you have to put in a request to do that. And your outie, who knows nothing about what you do at work, decides whether or not you get to quit.
That is
so
interesting.
It's as if somebody who doesn't know you decides whether or not you have to keep working. Because the two selves effectively don't know each other at all.
Kind of reminds me of the Shadow in the old White Wolf game, Ghost. That is interesting. And I'm guessing since it's billed as a psychological thriller, things get dark and violent.
Things get really weird and messy, yeah, because like as you go along, you're learning who these people are outside of work. Mm-hmm. And seeing what the differences are between who they are, like the aspects of their personalities. There's a pretty solid cast of people, some of whom you may not really know, like Britt Lauer and Zach Cherry. But Patricia Arquette is in it, is really, really good in her role. Christopher Walken is surprisingly un-Christopher Walken-ish.
Really? Okay.
It's an incredibly subtle performance on his part, and it's appropriate that it's that kind of a performance. You know how Christopher Walken can be, right? Where it's just he can be very Chris Walken. But there's a little bit of that there, but it is a much more subdued performance. I think of his performance in this reminds me of Robert De Niro in Jackie Brown, where we all know what Robert De Niro is like, but in Jackie Brown, the Tarantino movie, he is so subdued and he's just a sad sack scumball.
Yeah,
he's an ex-con, sad sack. His life is terrible. Like he just has nothing going on. He's trying to get the girl to like him, and he's just pathetic and very not De Niro. What De Niro tends to play with all the bravado and everything.
It's nice to see.
She got really annoying, so I killed her. I was like, what?
And it's got another major character too, John Turturro, who is really solid in it. And all of the people that I mentioned are either like in every episode or nearly every episode.
That is pretty cool. I'll have to see if I can check this out if it ever comes to iTunes. Every once in a while, I know with the Apple shows, they'll give you a few episodes over on iTunes you can check out, and then they want you to subscribe.
I did it. I don't subscribe to Apple. I did it with the 1 week free trial. 1 week, 9 episodes, easy. If you've got the time in a 1 week period, and they're like hour-long episodes, but they're really only 40 to 45 minutes a piece. Yeah. So with 9 episodes, I mean, you can punch that out in a week.
Might have to check that out
if you got a little free time.
That would be cool. I'm glad to hear Christopher Walken has more range than I thought he did, because he's going to play the Emperor in Dune.
Right.
So it's nice to know he can do it as someone other than star Christopher Walken.
Christopher Walken.
Oh, that's beautiful, sir.
His stilted delivery. Nice. He doesn't deliver the lines like that. I was like, wow, look at that. Christopher Walken doesn't have to do his weird vocal patterns, and he's still really compelling and interesting to watch.
He doesn't have to do his shtick. I stopped watching movies with Jack Nicholson, because God bless him. I've seen his earlier work, and I know the man has range and talent, but like for the last 20 or 30 years, he's kind of been on autopilot. He's just, I'm Jack Nicholson. And, it's fine, but it gets boring after a while. So nice to know Walken isn't having that problem. That's cool. So, what this kind of reminds me of? I was on Lunestra a few years ago with some sleep problems. And my wife said I was a lot funnier, but also much more annoying on Lunestra. And I was like, you can't get mad at me. I wasn't that dude. All right. I have no memory of any of that shit I said, but did not win me that argument at all. So now this looks really interesting. I'll have to check it out. Cool.
And
cool.
it's been renewed for a season 2. So like, you know, and with it being a thriller, I'll say this: 9 episodes and being kind of a mind game thriller.
Mhm.
There's not a wasted episode in the bunch, in my opinion. Like it's tight to keep it. Like every episode is story. Every episode makes stuff happen. Most of them end on some sort of a cliffhanger that like draws you back in. So like it was very easy to binge through it when you had it all available at once.
That is really good to hear, because a lot of times with streaming show, there's always some padding to just fill up the time. I'm glad to hear they don't do that with this one.
No, I wouldn't say that there's. I would say that there isn't a single episode that feels like extraneous in any way.
Sweet. Okay, cool. I'll check that out. Thanks for the recommendation. Once again, folks, Secrets of the Vibrant Sea is the podcast. Sorry, podcast.
Is the
Blame Nestor.
Kickstarter.
It's not me. Secrets of the Vibrant Sea is a Kickstarter. It's a fun, cozy solo tabletop RPG. You can find our Kickstarter or in our show notes. We've been talking to Craig Campbell, who you can follow at Nerdburger Craig on Twitter. Ashen Wave is the artist, and this is just some amazing art for this book. Jacob, did you have any questions or comments before we wrap things up?
If you enjoy this content, please support the BAMP Podcast Patreon.
And that's a good place to end it. Craig, any closing thoughts, sir?
Speaking of Patreon, I'm finally getting off my butt and making Capers Cyber.
Awesome.
Which is in production. It's under development, and starting in June, as June 1st, the first people will be charged. I'm doing a Patreon where I'll be revealing kind of the design as it goes and the process of it and everything. And all the money that comes in through the Patreon is going right into the artist to start first with concepting and then start doing actual art in order to help take a little bit of the sting out of the eventual big crowdfunding. To get it published. But that means like the people who patronize on the Patreon will be able to see that artwork like very early and kind of see what the game's going to look like and get a look at the content. And I'll do little video diaries and
get some of that
sorts of other stuff.
Director's commentary, behind the scenes sort of stuff.
Yeah, a little bit over the course of the next, I don't know, 6 to 10 months. We'll see how long I kind of run it along until I'm ready to say, okay, now I'm going to kind of going to shut down mode and wrap it up, and there's going to be play testing and all sorts of other stuff coming up down the road too.
So is the Patreon going to kind of be leading into a Kickstarter?
Yeah, it'll essentially lead up to a Kickstarter. My tentative plan is Kickstarter of fall next year. And I'll run the Patreon through the end of this year and into at least part of next year. As long as people are interested and as long as I keep the artist rolling and getting some of the art underway beforehand, so that I won't be, again, waiting on any more art than necessary. And it's a great way to get that tease out there and get people seeing what does it look like when it's modern day alternate like 2020s super powered criminals with cyber tech taking on mega corporations.
Okay, well, because we talked about capers before, which is kind of a fun, if you will, capers take on the supers genre through different time periods, and so cyber is kind of like your cyberpunk take on this then.
Yeah, it's the tail end of it's the bookend to the universe basically. And the first game starts in the 20s where you're playing these superpowered criminals in Prohibition, and by the time you get to 100 years later, they are humanity's hope to stave off the megacorps that have monetized and commoditized everything, including capers, including people with superpowers.
Cool. That's a real, and with everything happening politically, that's a timely setting. And through the magic of Google, I just found your Patreon.
There you go.
There. So patreon.com/nerdburgercraig. Check it out. Got some interesting stuff starting in the very near future. That will also be in our show notes. And thanks to everybody for checking us out. Here is our obligatory outro music. Once again, gentle listener, that assures you've just listened to a quality podcast. Only the best. Thanks for checking us out. We will see you next time on the BAMF Podcast.